someone's spirit is far worse than killing their body. This idea, which is what Judaism teaches us, if we think about it and we can wrap our heads around and really begin to absorb and get, can be a life-changing perspective. That spirit is far more important than body, and even when it comes to murder, it is far worse when we destroy someone's spirit than when we destroy their body. This means that when we cause someone to actually distance themselves from Almighty God, in English we call that committing a sin. That is far worse than when we merely, and when I say merely, I don't say that lightly, when we merely kill someone's body, ending their physical life. This is so profound because it anchors deeply within us the significance of the fact that existing doesn't come nearly to the value of living. Living being that we have spirit, we have a purpose for life, we are driven by the purpose God put us here, versus someone who's existing, that means that they are thriving and perpetuating only their physical existence. Ask yourself, as I ask myself often, what am I more concerned about? And we will find when we're honest that very often we get caught up in being consumed in perpetuating our physical existence. Now that in and of itself is only a problem when our physical existence is invested in further physical existence. But when our physical existence is about a deeper purpose of living, which is spirit, which is soul, then even our physical living is elevated to something much higher. And all of this is taught to us in very interesting teachings of the Torah, which I have no doubt you are familiar with, and that is the law that the Torah teaches us that a Jew must marry a fellow Jew. Now, this law is actually in the book of Devarim, in the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 7, you can read it in verse 3 and 4, where the Torah explicitly tells us that we are forbidden from marrying, a Jew is forbidden from marrying a Gentile. And we also learn from there, tangentially, that Judaism follows the mother. But the key point I want to focus on over here is, why is it that the Torah commands us that a Jew must marry a fellow Jew and not a Gentile? Are Jews racist? Do we have issues with Gentiles? The fascinating thing is that Judaism embraces humanity so gracefully and graciously that Judaism actually does not require, as some other religions do, that a Gentile convert to Judaism to be righteous and to get a portion in the world to come. In fact, Judaism does not teach that at all and encourages every person to live up to the fullness of who God designed them to be. And God chose certain people in the role of being a Jew, and they have the duty and the obligation to live up to that. And a Gentile has the duty and obligation to live up to being a righteous Gentile. What happens when a Gentile is a righteous Gentile is that they get a portion in the same world to come that a Jew gets when a Jew lives up to the values of being a righteous Jew. However, we are also clear that God designs everyone for specific roles. And being that marriage is not just something that we do because we enjoy it, but we do as a sense of need and instruction by God that the only way we can live up to our fullness is when we marry a life partner of the opposite gender, so that we create a wholesomeness and we can together reach something much greater than our own selves. When we do that, then we can live up to our wholeness. And if that is the purpose of marriage, we must marry someone who's got the same spiritual mission as us. Right? If we don't have the same spiritual mission as us, we're marrying someone and we are going in maybe directions side by side or even opposing, right? But how can we fulfill each other and complement each other and work together if we have separate missions? That really is one of the core reasons behind why a Jew must marry a Jew. That's the reason why. And what we find even more fascinating in this week's Torah portion of Ki Seitzei is a fascinating teaching. Chapter 23, verse 9, where, and really this conversation continues a few verses earlier, and you may want to pay attention to that, where this conversation begins. You see, the Torah tells us, puts into Gentiles, the Gentile world into, generally, I'm generalizing here because there are even more categories, but generally 3 categories. And that is, in general, a Jew cannot marry a Gentile. It's forbidden. It's forbidden for a Jew to marry a Gentile. However, if that Jew converts to Judaism, which is open to Gentiles to do, and we're going to see to most Gentiles to do, then the Jew can, then you're marrying, a Jew's marrying a fellow Jew. What happens when someone from the nation of Edom, or the nation of Mitzrayim, which is ancient Egypt, not current day Egypt, but ancient Egypt, decides to convert? The Torah says, because these nations killed the Jewish people, therefore they can convert, but they can only marry a fellow convert up to 3 generations. At the 3rd generation, can then enter fully into the Jewish people. That's what the Torah in Deuteronomy teaches us, chapter 23. And then the Torah tells us something even interesting a few verses prior, and that is, anyone from the nation of Ammon and Moab can never enter into the Jewish people. They can never convert and marry in with the Jewish people. What is the distinction between someone who's from an Ammonite or Moabite, that they can never marry into the Jewish people, versus an Edomite and a Mitzri, that they can, after 3 generations or at 3 generations, marry into the Jewish people? Rashi explains this very simply. And I want to emphasize that the Egyptians, as we know, we have a whole holiday called Passover, celebrating the exodus from Egypt, right? They enslaved us. They killed our firstborns. They killed our male children, right? God killed their firstborns, but they killed our male children. They were horrific to the Jewish people. And yet, after 3 generations, they can come marry into the Jewish people once they're converted. However, the Ammonites and Moabites were the nations, if you may be familiar with the story, where they hired the prophet Billum to curse the Jewish people. And they sent their daughters to entice the Jewish people to sin. God says, if you are going to get my children, the Jewish people, to sin, you're trying to destroy their spirit. That's true destruction. Such people who do such a vile thing to destroy the very spirit of the Jewish people can never intermarry into my people. They're too opposed. If someone only physically killed the Jewish people, they saw them as a threat, whatever it may be, but it was a physical attack, but not a spirit attack, at some point they can join my people. And this is how Rashi words it. Rashi says, you learn from here that someone who causes a person to sin does worse to him than one who kills him. For one who kills him only in this world, whereas one who leads him to sin removes him from both this world and from the world to come. Now, here's what I'd like to tell you. Today, without me going into the entire conversation, we don't really know who an Ammonite is, who a Moabite is, who an Edomite is, or Mitzri is. And the reason why is because Sancheriv came and he deliberately moved populations to all different countries, and therefore there was an entire confusion of who is who today, and we have no way of identifying who comes from any particular nation. So this is somewhat irrelevant today in this very literal practical sense. However, the way it is deeply relevant is us imbuing within our own selves the ability to live as people who are anchored in the physical world with the knowing that the real value of anything is the spirit of something and not the body. To really understand that living a fulfilled life, which will be an eternal life, which outlives us to perpetuity, not just while we are living, is a life that's dedicated to a purpose, a mission, and a cause. Namely, what God put you and I on this world for. And if you are a Jew, then that is studying the Torah and learning what God has instructed us. And granted, that will challenge us significantly because a lot of it is hard to relate to, as this very message is very hard to relate to. But the more we embrace this message, the more uplifted our lives will become. We will notice that. In fact, I would say that this message is the key element to someone living a deeply meaningful life versus a life that suddenly turns empty. And that is someone who realizes that spirit must be primary and a much greater focus than body. That the spiritual must be a much greater focus than the physical. And as we embrace this more and we realize the truth of it and the value of it, we also begin to take on what the Torah teaches us, much of which is a challenge. But hey, if you're getting information from the source of the infinite, which your mind cannot possibly grasp, right? Do you really expect to understand all of that? Right, and grasp all of it? I don't. I take it largely on faith. And with time, I notice that I am able to absorb a little bit more of it and a little bit more of it and be able to appreciate this real beauty of it and the value of the fact that I decided to live on the platform of faith in it so that I was ahead of myself even before I understood it and can have the richness of the life that this offers. There's nothing more rich than living a life that's invested in spirit. And that is the message that we get from this teaching. That to the extent the Torah tells us that there was a nation that was killing your male children, and we don't fully ostracize them. It is only those who actually wanted to destroy our spirit. Such people, that's such a violation, because that would annihilate us, theoretically, God forbid, entirely. That such people who are such an enemy, we cannot let into our nation. Don't let a perspective of nihilism, which is a perspective of living a physical-centered life, a body-centered life, take you over. Continue introducing more and more spirit. That spirit, if you're a Jew from the Torah, if you're a Gentile, learn about the 7 Noahide laws, the mission God gave to every Gentile. Live up to that. You will be a righteous Gentile, and you will also have a portion in the world to come.